Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing and a new installment in Afternoons with the Ambassador. And of course, continuation of my retro reviews. And today, we're going to be jumping into one of my favorite decades, the 1980s. And this is also a very special Afternoon with the Ambassador and a very special retro review for today. Well, yesterday, technically, but had some other things going on. Today would have been my dad, Father Ambassador's 77th birthday. And to him in heaven, I say, Happy birthday, Dad. This one's for you. And today we're going to be revisiting I would say, arguably one of the absolutely best films from the 1980s. And absolutely gorgeous, both visually and audibly beautiful films ever made. Milos Forman's Amadeus. And of course, if this is your first visit to the Ambassador Wing, I hope you enjoy your time here. I hope you enjoyed the review. Hope you enjoyed the stream. And if you are not already subscribed to the Ambassador Wing, hit that subscribe button. Come join all the fun where we discuss, we debate, and we celebrate pop culture. Where we talk cinema, where we talk streaming series, old series, new series, comic book movies, everything across the pop culture gamut. But today I wanted to spend some time with you all and share my thoughts on what is, for me, a quite literally a beautiful film. As I said, both to the eye and to the ear, it is a masterpiece. It is a testament to how great storytelling can be and should be done. Even though there is some artistic license taken with the real life history behind this story. And this film does depict the rivalry, well, the supposed rivalry between two of the last century's greatest musicians, greatest composers, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Antonio Salieri, played superbly by two absolutely masterful actors, Timothy Holt and F. Murray Abraham. And for those of you who might recognize that name, and you probably should, F. Murray Abraham most recently lent his voice talents to the Disney series, the Marvel series, Moon Knight, as Khonshu. But long before he ever entered the MCU, F. Murray Abraham garnered, and I say deservedly so, one of many Oscars, one of many awards that he won. He won an Oscar for his role as Antonio Salieri. And this film itself garnered, I believe, 8 Oscars in 1985, I believe, because this movie was released in 1984. But before we get into the review, I do want to share something with you all, both a bit personal, but also that will help guide us through this discussion this afternoon. As I said, yesterday would have been my Father Ambassador's 77th birthday. And I, for the longest time, have kept the identity of my family fairly well hidden. I've never mentioned them by name. I never will. But I see no harm, at least to this degree, to show who Mother and Father Ambassador were and are. Now, these are rather old pictures. These are pictures from my childhood and from when my parents first married, or a few years after they had married and after they had adopted me. And I'll bring this up real quick. Give me just a second. That right there, that's me. Little Ambassador. I was maybe 2 or 3 years old at the time. And this right here, this is Dad. This is Father Ambassador. and it's of course his mother ambassador. And yes, this picture was taken in the early 1980s, so yes, the attire is somewhat dated, but this is how we dressed back then. Deal with it. But these are two of the most important people aside from my wife, two of the most influential people besides my wife, and a few others in my life. But this man right here, this is Dad. This is Father Ambassador. And he was uniquely talented. He was a musician, and a great one. Not one that sought renown or acclaim for his talents. He used his musical gifts to bring joy and to bring happiness into other people's lives. He could sing like a bird and did so in the church choir and other events. He was a musician. He could play numerous and many musical instruments: the piano, the organ, every type of drum you could think of, both the bass, both the electric and acoustic guitar, and everything else across the board. Now you might ask, why are you bringing up your dad for this review? Because my father loved music, and because he seeded in me a deep appreciation for music as well. And it is why I picked this movie, Amadeus, to review. Because much like Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, though my dad's name is not in the history books, he had a real talent and a love and an appreciation for for musical talent himself. And I think if he were still alive today, he would have wanted to see this movie with me. He'd probably be right here listening to me, or maybe even giving his own 2 cents on this film, because that is one thing my dad also loved, and that was film. He loved movies. He loved discussing movies, and this is from something Mother Ambassador shared with me over the last several years. I mean, him and Mom would often go on dates, and they'd go to the movies. It's what you did back in the 80s when you were married, and you had your date nights, and you left your young and down here with your mom. Well, my grandmother ambassador. But that's part of the reason why I picked this movie to review today. One, because it is a great film in terms of the context of the 1980s, but I felt it was very fitting and appropriate to honor my dad's memory and to celebrate what would have been his 77th birthday. And I will show one more picture. This one is a few years into Mom and Dad's marriage, and this is a few years after, or a year or so after, my father had his heart transplant surgery. As you can see, he is somewhat thinner here and everything, but even though he was kind of limited in what he could do in terms of his performances, he primarily used his musical talents as in the different bands and musical units that he was a part of in the Shriners. For those of you that might be familiar with the Shriners organization, my dad was one. And this is a picture from a family trip we took to a local amusement park and everything. It had been a long time since I'd seen Dad. Obviously, I'm about 6 or 7 years old in this picture, and yeah, as you can see, wore glasses, just like Dad. So, all right, I'll pull this down for the time being until we get further into the review of the film itself. But again, like I said, I just wanted to share these pictures with you all, just to give you an idea of, well, who Father Ambassador looked like, and to share just a little bit of who he was and who he was to me. Anyway, all right. I'll bring that slideshow back up when we get into the further into the review. But as I said, today we're talking Amadeus. And this for me is this is a film I was introduced to right around the time we got our first VCR. And I had actually seen this film on cable a few times. And I was like, I love this movie. I absolutely love this movie. And Mother Ambassador would look at me and say, he had the weirdest laugh. The guy, the actor who portrayed Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Timothy Hulk, I believe is how you pronounce his name, and he did appear in one other film that I might review down the road. Here is also another great film from the 80s, and that was, of course, National Lampoon's Animal House. But he was also known for his role here, and I believe he also won a Oscar or some other reward for his role as Amadeus. But the thing I love about this film, though it does have some historical inaccuracies, this was shot in a part of the world where these people did live, where Amadeus and Salieri did live. And it was shot in Prague, in the what is now the Czech Republic. But here's the interesting thing about this film. This was obviously shot during the 1980s, and what was the big major world event that was still going on in the early 1980s? The Cold War. The director Milos Forman and the producers had to go to the Soviet authorities, had to go to the secret police, to the KGB, and get permission to shoot Amadeus in Prague, because Prague at the time was behind what was known as the Iron Curtain. And it was a very interesting shoot, to say the least, because, as I said, this film was shot during the 1980s in the midst of the Cold War between the United States and the former Soviet Union. And they had secret police crawling over the production. They had to answer all sorts of questions. The actors, the directors, every single person that worked on this production was rigorously watched and questioned as to what they were doing. But the interesting thing is, where they shot this film in Prague was still kept historically preserved, although unintentionally. It had not been modified, it had not been modernized, nothing of that kind. The buildings in which they shot, the streets, the neighborhoods, everything was still pristine to the period in which this movie, the time period in which this movie took place. And that was, of course, the mid to late 1800s, if I remember correctly. And that for me was a really eye-opening discovery, because you would figure the former Soviet communist government would not allow a major movie production to shoot in Soviet territory, and yet, through a lot of finagling and a lot of hard work, the production crew, the director, were able to get the permits, were able to get the access they needed to the locations that they needed to shoot this film, to shoot Amadeus. That was the hardest part of this shoot. Not that this production was not without its issues. As I was doing research for this film and also revisiting this film itself, come to find out, as they were casting the roles, as Milos Forman and the casting director and the other producers were trying to figure out who were they going to get to play these parts, who were you going to get to play Amadeus, who were you going to get to play Salieri, who are you going to get to play Amadeus's wife, and of course get to play the emperor. I think that would be the benefactor of both Amadeus and Salieri. was not an easy task for them, to say the least. And yet they were able to pull it off. Now, as I was doing my research, I come to find out the actress, the original actress they had cast for Constanza Mozart, Amadeus's wife, unfortunately, she suffered a very severe leg injury, and they ended up bringing in another actress. And I want to say hello to the chat, those of you that are in here, CJH and Games, Movies, and Comics RS. It's good to see you, fellas. Appreciate you popping in this afternoon. Um, give me just a minute because I do want to bring up the cast list for this film. That's the one thing I forgot to get. I got everything else, but I forgot to get the cast list. Cast list for this. Here we go. All right, 1 second here. Yes, that's what I want. All right, here we go. All right, as I mentioned, yeah, Tom Hulse. Excuse me, I mispronounced his name. So, sorry about that. Let me bring up the full cast list because I want to give you everybody. You, of course, had Tom Hulse as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. You had F. Murray Abraham as Antonio Salieri. You had Elizabeth Barrage as Constanza Mozart. You have Jeffrey Jones as Emperor Joseph II. You had Roy Dotrich as Leopold Mozart, Amadeus's father. Let's see. You had Simon Cowell was in this. Okay, cool. Been a long time since I've seen that name. Let's see. Who else do we have? Anybody else? This is an actor who I actually had seen in Star Trek. Vincent Schiavelli. I hope I'm saying his name right. If you see this, Vincent, I do apologize if I butchered your last name. Okay, I gotta share the screen on this one because this one's actually a surprise to me. So hang on 1 second because this is one name I did not expect, but maybe I should have. Let's see. Hang on. Chrome. Where is it? There it is. Okay. And share. All right. Kenny Baker was in this. Kenny Baker was in Mozart. Granted, it was a bit part, but still, he was in it. So, hey, R2D2 was in Mozart. So, right on, Kenny. Now, you also rest in peace. But yeah, this film was honestly, it was a labor of love for let's see if I can get the let's see. Oh, I actually got his picture right here. What am I doing? Okay, hang on. Let's move this. There we go. Okay, and remove. There we go. All right, now we'll bring this back up. Move past this one here. This is, of course, F. Murray Abraham as old Salieri. Everything. And if you're asking yourself, where have I heard that name before, aside from, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, as the voice of Khonshu from Moon Knight? Well, he was also in a relatively big film of the 1980s, and that is, of course, Scarface, which he actually did was released prior to Amadeus. So, F. Murray Abraham had a couple of back-to-back hits in terms of Scarface and, of course, as Antonio Salieri. One movie, he played kind of a sleazy character, that, of course, being Scarface, and then Amadeus, he played a rather noted and I think very talented composer. Although, as I said, the story that's told in Amadeus isn't completely historically accurate. And I did do some research on this, of course. As always, I do give credit where credit is due to Nick Hodges over at History Buffs, he did a very well crafted summary on the real life events and the real life relationship between Antonio Salieri and Mozart, and of course, both of their careers. And I encourage you, go check out that video. It is like I said, the video is a few years old now, but it's still relevant. It gives you the full history behind both these individuals. I'm covering this more from the aspect of the film itself and touching on the history and my own personal connection to it, obviously. So, but here you have Salieri and the old man Salieri makeup, because this movie is told in flashback. And it is told through a lot of narration. And I will say this much: I do like that type of cinematic storytelling. I do like a film that does use voiceover and um, flashback effectively. So, and of course, here is Timothy Hulk in his Amadeus wardrobe and him composing. Now, and then of course, here is young Salieri. Well, younger Salieri. Let's put it that way. Of course, you've got F. Murray Abraham as Salieri here in his costume and everything, and he's looking somewhat skeptically at a much younger composer, and that is, of course, Mozart. Now, the thing I found interesting also as I was doing my research for this film, everything aside from from watching it, because I like to give you all as much information as I can when I do these reviews, because I don't want just me flying by the seat of my pants and just giving my personal opinion, though that's what a review essentially is. But I digress. The thing I found interesting when listening to the director, he wanted the story to not necessarily take second stage or be secondary to the story, but he really wanted the music that these two men composed, particularly Mozart, to be at the forefront of the story. He wanted the music to drive the story. And I think that was a great move, because when you're talking about two extremely prolific and talented composers, one that was in a lot of ways a wunderkind, and that was, of course, Mozart, and another composer in the person of Salieri, who worked just as hard to craft his skill and his talent as a musician, as a composer. You want their gifts to be first and foremost at the front of everything you do in a movie like this. But they put just as much effort into the set design, though they didn't have to do a lot of set design for this film, because as I mentioned, they shot this in Prague, in what was once the cradle of classical composers and their music. Because Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and to a degree Eastern Europe, getting closer to Russia and so on, was a cradle for, it was a bastion of great composers. I mean, if you think about the great composers that we all know by name, whether or not we've ever listened to a drop of their music, you've got Mozart, you've got Beethoven, you've got Handel, you've got Salieri, you've got so many great composers that came from that part of the world. And I was deeply impressed with the attention to detail, both in costuming and set design, that this crew put into their efforts to make this film as authentic as they possibly could. The thing that one of the really stupendous things that I heard and everything, or watched as I was doing research, was the fact that they were actually able to shoot in one of the opera houses where Mozart put on the majority of his operas, and that it was still virtually, and it was almost 98% intact. And this was an old school, and when I say old school, I mean old school wooden opera house. Everything was wood. Everything was lit with gas. And the amazing thing was there was still gas in the lines, which actually was extremely dangerous. Because when they were shooting those sequences, when they were shooting those scenes where Salieri or Mozart were conducting their operas, they lit it with nothing but candlelight. Now, granted, they did have other forms of light. They had to, obviously. But you had these massive wooden chandeliers that had hundreds upon hundreds of candles lit. You had the sconces along the walls that were lit by candlelight. And that entire opera house was pretty much a tinderbox. One spark, and it all goes up. And yet, amazingly, except for a minor wardrobe malfunction with a feather on one of a cast member's hats getting caught on fire by a candle because they had their head too close to the candle, nothing happened. They were able to shoot the scenes, they were able to pull them off, and the proof is in the movie. The proof speaks for itself. And they literally had hundreds of people come in as extras, to be extras, as peasants, as background people, as the audience for these plays and for these operas. Well, I should not say plays. I should say specifically operas, because that's what Mozart and Salieri primarily composed and created. But it was a marvel to me to hear them say that they not only did they get the permission, but that amazingly they were able to safely shoot, because they took meticulous caution to make sure that obviously no one got hurt during the filming of these sequences. And that to me is a testament to just how a good production can go. And this was, from what I have listened to, what I have read, and so on, this was a production that everybody thoroughly enjoyed. It wasn't without its stresses. It wasn't without its issues, obviously, but from what I've been able to gather, the people, the cast, the crew, they all got along. They all worked well together. There was no infighting or anything. Obviously, you wouldn't think, because these are professionals. These are professional actors and actresses and cast and crew people and everything across the board. Now, another interesting thing, I'll bring this down here. Another interesting thing that I found was the casting process itself was rather rigorous in terms of how Milos Forman casted this film, because he went through literally dozens, if not hundreds, of auditions for every single role practically. And I found it funny listening to F. Murray Abraham share his thoughts on this film. And this was F. Murray Abraham much younger, back in the 80s. This was an original interview that he gave back in the 1980s for this film. And he was like, I was a working actor at the time. I had done a whole lot as of yet. And he's like, when Milos called me and said, you're my first choice, he's like, Milos, I love you, man, but that doesn't pay the bills. I need to know if I've got this. And then finally, when Milos Forman pulled the trigger and said, okay, you got it, you're Salieri. And watching Abraham go through the prosthetics work, he would have to get there early and everything, because it took time and everything. It even takes time nowadays for actors and actresses to go through prosthetics work. but just to make him look older, to make him look like an older version of himself, essentially. And he was like, after a while, you just kind of go into a bit of a trance, and you kind of get accustomed to this routine. And to see the transformation, as I showed you all a few minutes ago, was really something. And the amazing thing was, for the biggest part of the shoot, of the production shoot of the film, F. Murray Abraham was kind of on his own because, as I told you, this movie was told primarily through flashbacks from Salieri's recollections to, I think it was a reporter or something along those lines, or well, a early reporter, or I think, to give his account of what exactly happened between him and Salieri, him and Mozart. Now, I will mention one thing here. There was rumors at the time, and I think these are rumors that still float around in the music community, that Salieri was somehow responsible for Mozart's death because sadly, like many great minds, like many brilliant artists many brilliant artists, they sometimes succumb to illness. And there had been rumors for the longest time that Salieri had a beef with Mozart, but from all the correspondence that we saw between the two of them and just their own personal private correspondence, they had nothing but the deepest respect for one another. And Salieri vehemently, and I think justifiably, denied having anything to do with Amadeus's death. And while this movie, like I said, is somewhat historically accurate in terms of the relationship between these two characters, you do have to have a bit of drama and to drive the story, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think I would have preferred if maybe they had left out the rivalry, or maybe not made it where Salieri was responsible and made it more of a tragic death for Mozart, where he got sick and died. It happens. But as things often go, sensationalism wins out. But I hope anything that through the course of this review and discussion or anything, maybe I can, of my own personal small way, counter the entire argument that Antonio Salieri had anything to do with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's death, because he did not. Of course, like I said, this is long past caring. These two fellas are long since dead, but still their reputations still remain. Their reputations should be upheld. But one of the other things going back to my childhood, as I said, Father Ambassador instilled in me and encouraged me to have an appreciation for music and all forms of music, not just one particular genre or another. And that's one of the things that drew me to this movie, because I do have a love. I mean, yeah, it sounds weird. A guy that has posters like this behind him of Empire Strikes Back, Death on an Island, Dune, loves classical music. But I love classical music. I love modern music. I love retro music from the 80s and the 90s. I mean, I love music from practically every single decade. There's only a handful of genres I do not particularly care for, and that's just personal preference. But I recall a field trip that I took in elementary school, and we got to go to listen to a local Philharmonic perform, or a symphony. Symphony. Yeah, I think I'm using the right term here. Philharmonica. That's the term I'm looking for. And being the young gentleman that I was as a young kid in elementary school, I was like, Mom, grandmother, grandma, I want to dress up for this. I want to look nice for this. So I had my little suit, my pin on, my clip on tie, my little dress shirt, dress shoes, everything. And a lot of my friends were in just slacks and a polo shirt or whatever, or a crew neck long sleeve shirt or whatever. And they would look at me and go, "Why are you dressed like that? We're just going to listen to some music." I'm like, "We're going to listen to classical music. We're going to listen to a symphony." And I said this in the way that like a 6 or 7 year old would say it, not the way I'm saying it now, obviously. But I was like, it's good. It's right to dress appropriately. And we left the performance, and my friends were like, "Geez, that was so boring. I hated this. Why do we have to go on this field trip? This sucks." And I was just sitting there beaming on the bus ride back to the school, and they're like, "Why are you so happy? That was boring." I was like, "No, it wasn't. That was cool. We got to listen to some really cool old music, and it was beautiful." And that is the impact that my dad, we'll call him RG, had on me. Because of him, I grew up with a disposition to appreciate art in all of its forms. And that's why I love sharing my thoughts on movies like this, movies that most YouTubers probably wouldn't even touch. And yes, because this review is a bit personal because it is on the weekend of my dad's will have been my dad's birthday. But I go where other YouTubers don't even bother to tread. Now it's cool to talk about Star Wars and Marvel and DC and all sorts of other pop culture type things. It's great to talk about the things that we loved as a kid and everything. But it's movies like this, movies like Amadeus, that aren't just part of the pop culture landscape, but that feed our souls, that remind us that there is beauty in the world around us. And it's movies like this that show us what a truly gifted and talented cast and crew and director can put forth when they're given the opportunity to craft a story and to put it out onto the world, or bring it out to the world and for the world to receive it. And I don't, give me a minute because I do want to see what the box office was for this movie when it originally came out. Because I'd wager it probably did. It did pretty damn well. So let's see. Box office. Well, here's the IMDb. That'll probably give me everything I need. Thank you, IMDb. You are my hero, so to speak. Anyway, okay. Okay. IMDb gives it an 8.4 out of 10. I'd give it a 9.5 out of 10, but that's me. Let's see here. Okay. Won 8 Oscars. I'd say that's pretty darn good, too. Let's see here. All right. What was its box office? Let's go back. IMDb may not give you that. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, and this is from the website The Numbers. Amadeus 1984 made 51,973,000,000 and 29,000 dollars. Let's see, and its production budget was only 18 million. So I'd say it did pretty damn good. Pardon my French. Let's see. All right, it released. Huh. It released on September 19th, 1984. International release. It was released on February 14th, 1985. It was released on video December 17th, 1997. Okay. Isn't that just interesting? So this movie did do well at the box office. So, hey. And it did well quickly. So, LDG, hey buddy, good to see you too. Doing well. How are things? Things are pretty good. Talking about a favorite movie of mine from the 1980s. Well, you can see it. You saw the thumbnail. You see it underneath here. I'm talking about Amadeus. So, but before I do wrap up this review, I do want to share a couple of pieces of music, both from the key players in this film. Now, hopefully, the overlords at YouTube won't strike me down for this because I think music like this is public domain. But if it isn't, well, then I'll worry about that in post. So, the first piece I want to share is a piece by Antonio Salieri called De Profundis. So, give me just a minute. I'll bring that up. Because I don't want you all just to hear me talking about this movie and talking about these characters. I shouldn't say characters, these people. I want you to hear what they were able to create. So bear with me for just 1 second, guys. All right, here we go. Okay, unmute and play. They don't do music like that anymore. It's a damn shame. That was, of course, De Profundis by Antonio Salieri. And the next piece and last piece I will share with you all is by the maestro himself, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Lacrimosa. Sorry, guys. I don't. I know I don't usually get that quiet. When you hear music like that, it just it hits you a little. It hits you a little differently. And like I've said at the start of the stream and throughout it, my dad. If I might be a little bit real for just a minute here. Well, you know my story. You know the story with me and my dad. When he died in 1984. I guess as you get older, you miss people a little bit more. And days like yesterday, his birthday, and it's not always easy to put on the brave face and say you're okay. Especially when you wish you had had more time with the people that you care about, particularly your parents. And to kind of bring this back around to the movie a little bit. Mozart's relationship with his father wasn't always easy for him because his father pushed him and expected the very best of him. And he was maybe a little too hard on his son. And that's kind of what's depicted in the film. That's what drove Amadeus to push himself far beyond maybe more than he should have. But in terms of my dad, I know what he would say to me if he was still alive today. He would tell me to live a good life, to be fair to others, to love my family and my friends, to stand up for what I know and was taught, to believe what is right, to live life to its fullest. And all these are things that he taught me through his example, though he never said them to me. And that's what I have striven to do for these last 43 years. Or at least since I got old enough to care how I live my life in a way that honors my dad's memory. And for those of you that watched or have watched or will watch my Kenobi stream last night, you might notice I went on a little bit of a rant. And I stand by that rant. Every word of it. Because it is what I believe, it is what I feel, and it is what I stand by. Because my father, may he rest in peace, or be resting in peace with his Savior. I would want him to be able to look down from heaven and say to the big guy, "That's my boy. That's my son. And I am proud of him." That's why the ambassadorial wing is what it is. It is how I want it to be. It is why I will never turn my back on my principles. I will never sell out. I will never back down or relent to what I know and I believe what is right. And I will never be anything more than what I am. Nothing fake, nothing phony, nothing disingenuous. But every inch of the man that I've formed myself to be and how my parents and grandparents raised me to be. And as a person, as a man who loves pop culture, who will discuss it with joy rather than derision, that will critique it fairly, but will also celebrate it, that will not use the same tired clickbaity terms like woke, and will call balls and strikes as I see them. And it will cover movies like this. Movies like Amadeus that are beautiful pieces of cinema that enrich and enlighten the human soul that dwells within all of us. But stepping down from off of my soapbox, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this review. Of course, if you when you catch us on the replay, if you enjoyed this, make sure you smash that like button. You share this movie out. You share this stream out with your friends who are lovers of cinema from the 1980s, who love classical music, whether they say it unabashedly or very quietly. And if you come across this stream and you enjoyed it, and you are not a part of the ambassadorial wing, hit that subscribe button and become a part of this community where we discuss, we debate, and we most definitely celebrate pop culture in all of its forms: cinema, streaming series, old school series, comic books, whatever it is. If it's pop culture and it's awesome, here at the Ambassadorial Wing, we cover it. And we do so honestly. And with a touch of humor. So, but that being said, folks, stay ambassadorial. Have a great week. Have a great rest of your day. And until next time, this is the Ambassador, signing off.